Hello and welcome. My name is Amanda Granger. I'm the Director of Community Engagement at the WNET Group, the home of Channel 13, America's flagship PBS station in New York City. On behalf of everyone at the WNET Group, thank you for joining us for Grace Under Pressure, Town Halls on Mental Health. Throughout the spring, we are examining mental health from the perspectives of 5 groups that help define American society: healthcare workers, K-12 teachers, mental health providers, activists, and journalists. As always, we are presenting frank talk about issues and solutions with an understanding of history and eyes toward the future. Grace Under Pressure is live streaming every Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern from April 28th to May 26th. You can learn more at 13.org/graceunderpressure. Tonight's program, The Only Option is Action, a conversation with activists about mental health, is presented by the WNET Group and Chasing the Dream, our national multi-platform reporting initiative that explores inequality, opportunity, and justice in America. You can watch the programs produced by this initiative at pbs.org/chasingthedream or at youtube.com/chasingthedreampbs. Please subscribe. Part of our station's mission is to provide meaningful experiences to our audiences and communities, to educate, entertain, and inspire. By bringing together leaders who are at the front lines of creating systemic change, we hope Grace Under Pressure will provide new perspectives and ideas that will be helpful to all of us in strengthening mental health in our own lives and communities. We will have time for an audience Q&A towards the end, so as you watch the live stream, please post your questions in the comments section. And we hope you'll join us again next Thursday for the final program in this series, Break the News, a conversation with journalists about mental health. Again, you can learn more at 13.org/graceunderpressure. You can also watch our previous conversations at that link. I'd like to take a moment now to thank our promotional partners for Grace Under Pressure. We are so grateful for the support of the Asian American Federation and the National Alliance on Mental Illness of New York City, or NAMI NYC. Thank you also to our ASL interpreters for tonight, Tracy Winters and Wanye Jefferson. And last, a very special thanks to WNET's 400 plus community partners from across sectors and across communities throughout the 5 boroughs. Their input has shaped and inspired our thinking around this topic and many others on air, online, and in our public events. A quick reminder that the views expressed by tonight's guests and attendees are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of the WNET Group. And now I'm pleased to introduce WNET's Director of Community Partnerships, the curator of Grace Under Pressure, and tonight's moderator, Brian Tate.
Thank you so much, Amanda, and greetings, everyone. I want to begin by acknowledging and paying deep respect to the Lenape people, upon whose unceded and ancestral homeland lies the city we call Manhattan. Please join me in making this affirmation from a place of humility and solidarity with an ongoing commitment to decolonization and racial justice. I want to also acknowledge the continuity between our meeting here today and the collective struggle for liberation and the full expression of our humanity that has transcended generations. Many lives have been lost in that struggle, some quite recently and some historically. We hold all those people close. We are thankful for their lives, and we honor them as we gather across communities to speak truth. I'd like to now thank all of you for joining us for week 4 of Grace Under Pressure. Since starting this summit 3 weeks ago, we've held powerful conversations with healthcare workers, K-12 teachers, and mental health providers. And we are very excited for tonight's event. I'm personally excited. This is the one that I'm going to moderate. At the start of each of these town halls, we present a short performance by a musician, a gifted musician, a spoken word artist, to help draw us together across this virtual space and remind us why we are having these conversations for the culture. We're thrilled to have with us tonight a very special performer to kick off tonight's forum. Please join me in welcoming poet, writer, teacher, curator, Black girl, author, Black Girl Mansion, also my dear friend and sister, Angel Nafis.
Hello. I'm so thank you, Brian. I'm so happy to be here. I'm Angel. I'm here to read a poem. But before I do, I just wanted to thank you for gathering us all here. I don't know how many folks watching know Brian, but you can trust wherever he is, wherever he's at, he's bringing his very unique, specific talents towards like fixing what is broken or enhancing what is already working. And I just anytime I get the invitation from him to come and to gather, I feel reminded that I have everything I need with me already to serve my community. There's nothing extra I have to do. Come as I am, poems and all. Just come as I am. So wherever you're at, just come as you are. We're welcoming you. So I'm going to read this poem. This poem is for my people, my organizers, teachers, artists, journalists, caregivers, shit starters, dreamers, celestial aunties, outside of the box thinkers. We need you. We need you. This is called Woo Woo Roll Deep. For all my siblings, kin, and ancestors refusing the boot. We all we got. We all we need. Woo woo roll deep. And it's not just me. Be clear. The whole squad is woo woo. Kin, stay lifted up in metal clouds or knuckle deep in the earth, talking about how their periods are right around the corner and what that means alongside Channy's latest Mercury read. Shira can't wait to tell you about the dream she had. Big eyes growing wider at each detail, freaked out and charged at the spirit's hooks deep in her brain's knowing signal. It's all connected. Courtney paints one wall, Miss My Daddy Red, in every new home she stays in. Morgan says she wants to find love this year, so keeps a rose quartz between her breasts. Geo, the third grade teacher in Bed-Stuy, used to end all her emails. Bet you love could make it better. A week after the 314th police killing this year, Jenna mixes up a tincture of charcoal, lemon, lavender in little spray bottles and hands them out to us after burgers in Harlem. Woo woo. Josie got her man's EKGs tatted on her ring finger. 3 years since he crossed, and you best believe she's correct when she talks about him in the present tense. Jelani keeps a frothy pot of black-eyed peas boiling on New Year's Day. Marley staves off the yeast with a garlic clove deep in her puss. You can't tell us shit. We're always down for the miracle. The regular dawn making a brand new farm of our hearts. Jesse, the filmmaker / jewelry maker / teaching artist, dangles a dried out tea bag just above her nose and gapes intently at this new face of God appearing right before her like, isn't this, aren't we the most beautiful thing you've ever seen? Thank you.
Angel, it's just so wonderful to be in your presence. And that work, like always, just lifts us right up and creates the right kind of space that we need to have this tough conversation. I want to thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Brian.
We could hear you read another 5 or 10.
Oh, really? Listen, I can read the whole portrait for you. One-man show.
Do you have another piece you would like to read?
Totally.
Go
Absolutely.
for it. Go for it.
Happy to. I've got another piece. It's kind of about just like the solo journey. I mean, I know that we're talking about the necessity to gather together, to commune and to like gather our resources, nourish each other, right? That's like critical for our mental health. But I think especially being in the pandemic, we were faced with the major disruption and dilemma that is isolation. And so I spent so much of my time in my tiny microscopic Brooklyn apartment, really trying to ground myself in the abundance that solitude can permit. So I'm gonna read a little poem called Solo. And it's kind of, I don't know if we have any Frank Ocean fans in the audience, but I was listening to his song Solo, and this poem kind of came to me. Okay. Solo. I rediscovered joy again, and it is good again. Just in time for spring, creeping up the 5 floors to crowd my 8 windows. Better than a cocktail, I think, but not as good as brushing my own hair or any bridge on blonde. I'll admit it to you here. Thin little poem, black strip of witness down this vast whatever. I miss being 19, but I would never go back to that muddy river, hole in the paddle boat, the only light, some starlight I made up. Certainly, I am the shore, the dawn. So I like to sit on the edge of my bed in front of the floor-length mirror trimmed in wood and watch the white smoke exit from my parted lips. And for once, I notice my little eyelashes. Alone as I am, I think to myself, I am 31. Just look at my brown little knees. I should get a tattoo right beneath my collarbone. I'm glad it's Friday, damn it. While I finish these dishes, I'm gonna lean all in to a song that deserves me.
Oh boy. It's a temptation here, family. I'm going to resist it. We actually have a group conversation to go to, but
I'm so grateful. I'm always. I mean,
thank
literally,
you.
it's, you can, anytime you tell me to show up, I will show up. I'm so happy to be here. I'm be logging in and watching the rest of this conversation. I'm so grateful for all the panelists, all the thinkers, all the people gathering together, because it's so noisy and violent right now. Always, but really right now. And we're, you know, we are each other's magnitude and bond, as Gwendolyn Brooks says. We are each other's bread and butter, each other's magnitude and bond. I'm so grateful.
Yes, likewise, Angel. So are we. Thank you so much. We'll talk soon, my friend. Okay, everybody, if you were as moved as we were by what Angel just read, you can learn more about her and her work at her website, angelnafis.com. I think that's being dropped into the chats where you are, angelnafis.com. Okay, I'm going to move on now and ask you to please join me in welcoming tonight's incredible panel for The Only Option is Action, a conversation with activists about mental health. People watching, you can find everyone's full bios at our website, 13.org/grace-under-pressure. Go there, there's a link with everyone's bios, and you can learn more about these people and the incredible work that they're doing. And that link should also be in the chats at YouTube and at Facebook. And remember that the panel would like to hear from you as well. So I'll have my own questions for them, but please post your questions into that same chat and we'll get them and we'll ask them, and looking forward to hearing what you want to hear about as well. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming our guests, Mike Ishii, co-chair, Sudo for Solidarity.
Good to be here, Brian.
Always, brother. Judith LeBlanc of the Caddo Nation, the director of the Native Organizers Alliance. Judith. Well, Judith, you're muted.
What a pleasure to be in this circle.
Indeed, thank you. Maru Mora Villapando, CEO of Latino Advocacy and the founder of La Resistencia. Maru.
Thank you for the invitation. Hi.
Felissa Thompson, LMSW, founder and CEO of Ramp Your Voice. Felissa.
Hi, Brian. It's so great to be here.
And it's wonderful to see you seated outdoors, Felissa.
Yes.
That just creates a whole different type of energy for us. and Nala Toussaint, the founder of Reuniting of African Descendants. Nala,
It's great to be here, everyone, and in this space.
it's wonderful to see each of you here. So I have some questions. You know, I talk to some of you so often that on the one hand, I was thinking, well, you know, I need to write down these questions, but it's actually just a continuation of so many of the conversations that we have. And I've also researched so much of the things that you all are concerned about and talk about. It's a real honor for me to be in this space with you all. So here's the first thing I want to get at is that it seems that people who are pushed to the margins are facing three types of violence right now. There are the physical attacks, there is the systemic injustice, and there is the narrative violence. And sometimes all three of those are entwined. And I want to talk about how each of those forms of aggression impact our individual and collective well-being and what we can do about them. So I'd like to start by talking about the physical attacks. And Maru and Velissa, I want to direct this first question to you. By turning to this nightmare that we saw unfold in Buffalo, which echoed violence, racist violence that we've seen in El Paso, in Charleston, in Christchurch, in Pittsburgh, directed at specific communities. What is it that we should understand about this violence? What are the most important things? You know, Angel mentioned, you know, there's so much of the noise. What are the most central things for you that we should understand about this violence that's being done against all of these communities, against all of our communities? And how do we respond? How do we process and respond to this physical violence without losing our sense of purpose, without losing our sense of self? So I'd like to ask Velissa, if you would pick that up, and then Maru.
Yes. You know, with the latest incident in Buffalo and also in LA this week, you know, the violence feels so inescapable. You know, I was talking to my aunt earlier in the week, and it's like we cannot go do anything as Black people. We can't go to the store, we can't go to church. You know, we just can't be, you know, in general. And that does a lot on someone's psyche in realizing the terror of just existing, not doing anything to harm anybody, just being yourself. And especially during these times to where existing feels so much for people who have lost so much over the 2 years, going on 3 of the pandemic, you know, whether you've actually lost people, you know, due to the virus or other reasons, you know, lost sense of control, sense of time, sense of uncertainty. Grief and loss has just been an active part of our lives over the past 2+ years. And for those of us in marginalized communities, particularly Black folks, that's just kind of commonplace. And it really shouldn't be. You know, people should be able to live their lives without fear, without being scared that they may not come home. And I think that we're not talking enough about the psychological traumas and triggers of what it means to hear these stories day by day, and feeling so helpless. You know, what do we do? How do we keep each other safe? I think that's what we're constantly asking each other again and again. And when it comes to those in leadership positions in our communities, from community leaders to politicians, then the inaction is so frustrating because no one is doing anything that will be effective enough to keep everybody safe, because it's people who are considered disposable that are being harmed.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Maru?
Yeah, thank you, Velissa, for starting. I feel like it's a very heavy and huge question to answer, but I think that the first thing we see in the news is it happened again, and we're not surprised anymore. And it feels heavy just to think it's been so normalized that we expect how many more, which community this time, in which city, in which town. And I think the narrative builds a lot of this normality that, well, if he was a white person against Black people, well, it's just because, they have a mental illness. But if he happened to be maybe a person of color, oh, well, yeah, they're terrorists. And so that for us, especially for the immigrant community, is especially important because what we see is that the system excuses all the violence that they commit against us. They have the best excuses, and they have it built in the laws. It's permitted to them to commit this violence against us. And therefore, white people that are in power feel entitled to extend that violence through these physical direct attacks on our communities. I think that for us, especially people in the detention center, have said again and again that are detained by Immigration Customs Enforcement, if you're a Black person here detained, it's the worst thing that can happen to you. Just this morning, somebody called me to say, we're in solitary confinement, we've been on hunger strike, but the guy that is from Africa, the guard is coming to him and he's just attacking him constantly. He's telling him so many things. He's getting the worst of it. So this narrative, we need to change it. And I think that's to me, is one of the most important things to understand. But at the same time, is to understand that, for example, these guys that are fighting to survive in such a violent system, they're defending themselves. That's how they respond, by protecting each other. I don't hear from probably the person that is receiving these offenses from this guard, but I'm hearing from the other saying this is not right and somebody should do something. We need to protect him. And I think that's what our communities do. We don't let it to be seen as normal, and we fight back through love. Honestly, I mean, it could sound cursi and everything, but to us is very important that we don't do what the system does. We don't destroy, we build. We don't hate, we love.
Thank you. You touched on a couple of things there, both of you, that I want to dig into in terms of what's happening in the detention centers, but also standing against and speaking against the normalization of these types of events. I want to turn now, though, to talking about structural violence. And this is a question for Judith and Nala. U.S. Interior Secretary Deb Haaland, the first Native American to serve as a cabinet secretary, recently announced the discovery of burial sites at 53 Native American boarding schools. And down in Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis has signed into law a law that forbids the instruction of sexual orientation and gender identity in kindergarten through third grade. Now a dozen more states are considering legislation that mimics the Florida law and perhaps goes beyond it. What can you two tell us about the emotional impact of those actions and where government is involved and arrayed against a people? And also the type of activism that is at work to counter those types of things. Judith, would you start, please?
Yes, I think it's, we're in a moment, a political moment, when there are many revelations about systemic racism. And in some ways, it's a magic movement moment for all of our peoples, because things that we've known, we've believed, we've felt are being confirmed with facts and discoveries like these burial sites. We've been impacted by and continue to be generationally by the impact of boarding schools, which were yet another policy used in a certain stage of US history to try to cut Native peoples off from their connection to land, language, and culture. I think this magic movement moment, though, is that there is a sense of mourning but it confirms what we've believed and experienced in our small communities, our large communities. We've known about this. But what it has done, surprisingly, because of where the country is at, it has given people a reason to organize more, to bring to light more, and to provide solutions. I mean, I'm not saying the worse is better, but what I'm saying is that people are not satisfied with just knowing the history. They're starting to see themselves from an indigenous framework in Indian country and beyond Indian country. They're starting to see themselves within the time continuum, that the past and the future come together in the present. What we do, how we walk in the present, is our medicine. It's our way of healing, that we feel the power of our values, our history, but also the power of knowing that we are paving the way for several generations in the future. And so I think although these acts by the government present a clear and present danger, we also see in Indian country the fact that it motivates us, because organizing is our medicine. It's a way to heal.
Yeah. Before we move on, Judith, just to stay on that for a minute, can you talk about, organizing is our medicine. Can you talk about how that played into the election of Deb Haaland and then the subsequent appointment of her to that role?
I'd love to talk about that. I'd love to talk. Every time I talk about it, my heart is so full, because no one believed ever in our lifetime that we would see an Indian woman heading up the Department of Interior, which controls and affects every aspect of Indian life: land management, water, governance, healthcare, education. And the truth is that the Biden administration had in mind someone else, a very good, solid white guy who, had a lot of experience in the Department of Interior and the workings and the things that it oversees. But we sent a signal from the grassroots that the time is now. The 2020 election, historic Native vote, huge, huge Native vote, alongside of all the others who came out because there was a clear and present danger. And because of that, we were able to organize and mobilize tens of thousands of people to press the transition team, and then the committee, Natural Resources Committee in the Senate, and then the Senate. We got thousands of people, tens of thousands, to say the time is now. The racial reckoning moment we're in means that an Indian woman should be heading up this department. Now, I want to just say that it took us hundreds of years for Indian women to be elected for Congress. The first Indian women, 2018. So Native people, we're going through a series of firsts that kind of indicate this magic movement moment in Indian country, where we, alongside of Black Lives Matter, the struggles of undocumented immigrants, the women's movement right now, we are interrupting the narrative, and we're exercising that grassroots political power that can bring about structural changes. And Deb Haaland, her appointment is not a destination. It's a reflection of the grassroots political power and the need for this country to address systemic racism.
Thank you, Judith. Nala, I want to ask you this question about the impact of systemic injustice. What can you tell us about how it is felt by people on the ground, and what kind of activism and what types of responses can be made to address it?
Yeah, thank you, Brian. There is so many impacts, but really grounding on the emotional part. I think about anxiety, I think about depression often, and how that shows up across folks who hold intersecting identities that are often oppressed systemically, right? So let's think about Black, Indigenous, people of color, and the intersections of sexual orientations or gender, right? So, earlier you talked about some policies that currently are anti-trans, right? We have 51 states, but we know that the anti-trans laws that exist is over 100, right? And so when you have individuals who are in the intersection of Blackness and who see systemically unjust, right? And then you see folks who are Black and trans who hold identities that are often oppressed, what it feels emotionally is that I'm not worthy of living, right? Those are the thoughts and the language that we hear. I'm not worthy of living. How can I live and push forward if there aren't any spaces where I can exist? And so we see that across the many ecosystem of living, right? Education. We see that in military bands, right? We see that in detention. We see that in, as I said, education, but also food security, right? We don't think about how these laws trickle down where folks need to access their basic needs of survival, not just within the US, but also internationally. So I like to think of the US as a tossed salad of many different cultures. But when we are able to identify the anti-Blackness that exists and the gender-based violence, what we see is the ripple effect globally where trans folks, particularly and queer people, are not supported systemically, not from education, not from safety, right? Both safety emotionally and physically when they're going to and from home. We're looking at rape conversion therapy that trans, queer, and non-binary people experience. We're looking at school push out, like prison, school to prison pipeline, for example, right? No one is talking about how bullying for trans folks and the infrastructure that does not support trans folks to stay in school allows them to be pushed up and pushed out and then get incarcerated. Thinking about things like Walking While Trans, right? Now imagine the Walking While Trans, but also and Walking While Black and holding those intersections. And then I think about Polanco, last name, who, she had a bail. She was in Rikers. She had a bail for $500 and she had other mental challenges and suffered from epilepsy and she ended up dying because the guards would not listen to the amount of care that she needed. And I think about this African proverb that the lion often, the hunter gets to tell the story and how the lion doesn't. And I think about that for queer and trans folks, right? That oftentimes we are marching and asking for our stories to be heard. But when we think about who's in power, those stories are then flipped, as was mentioned earlier by Valencia and Maru, and even Judith highlight that we are terrorists, that we are disruptive, that we're not safe. When we look at it, we're like, well, where's our safety? Where's our space to exist? Who's caring for us? So I think about all of those things. It's very layered.
Well, the thing that among the many things that you just lift up, Nala, is again this entwining of the physical, the structural, and the narrative aggression facing people across all of our communities and more. Mike, I want to bring you in and ask you and Valissa to talk for a moment about narrative violence, which precedes and enables and often accompanies these other forms of threat. And this includes, on the one hand, we have lies that are told about a people to justify some inhumanity committed against them, which an inhumanity which often historically has had a financial piece attached to it. And on the other hand, we're talking not about disinformation or just flat untruths told about a people, but we're talking about people being completely excluded from the narrative altogether, and essentially attempts to make people invisible. So I want to hear from both of you from the standpoint of the work that you're doing. How does that narrative aggression, how does that narrative violence impact folks on the ground from what you're seeing, and how do you respond to it? How should people respond to it? Mike, would you start, please?
Sure. I want to start, however, by just taking a moment to acknowledge that today is the birthday of both Malcolm X and Yuri Kochiyama, two of our beloved ancestors and liberation leaders who inspired and changed the world and left a legacy that we are still unpacking and really embracing. And so I just want to take a moment to honor them and give my gratitude to them. Yuri said, decolonize your mind and cross borders. So, you know, she was already a narrative change liberation fighter. And I think in this moment, if I can relate this to the first question also, that we're trying to have, I'm not sure we're succeeding either, but we're trying to have a reckoning about our narrative as a nation, the United States nation, I'll say. And I think, you know, it's really hard to have this conversation unless we can have a truth saying, which is that the country is founded on attempted genocide and stolen land, and then forced removal, enslavement of people from Africa. And then, you know, there is a whole separation of families, mass incarceration, traumatization and targeting of our children, deportations, and de facto and state violence. And all of this has been done in the service of the white narrative. And so we're talking about trying to correct really the understanding of history so that we can understand the moment we're in. So if we're talking about the only option is action, then if we're talking about mental health, then our country is deeply mentally ill. And, you know, we're all leaders of color here who are organizing in communities. But really, I want to pose a challenge to white leaders, which is you've got to go get your people. Because without white people acknowledging that they are part of the equation here of violence targeting our people, then nothing actually will change very quickly. Because what we're seeing right now in the escalation, you know, around Buffalo, we're now hearing this thing about replacement theory. Well, that's just the latest version of white supremacy racism rollout. And really what it represents is a fear of loss of privilege and really a willingness to kill people in order to keep it. And so when you think about erasure and violence, I would also, Brian, in your list, I would also include emotional spiritual violence, because you know, there's a book out now called The Body Keeps the Score, right? And the physical wounds will be healed or they will kill you, but the trauma will go on, as the indigenous people say, for 7 generations. So what we're dealing with right now is sort of the chickens coming home from 7 generations. And what they're doing now, we're still going to be paying that forward for 7 generations. So, you know, the question for us as organizers is, you know, how do we address this? And I get asked this question a lot, frankly. And I guess here's what I want to say today, which is that there's often, when something horrific happens and it sort of wakes people up out of their sort of stupefied slumber, then there's a desire for a response, and it's often legal, humanitarian, or medical response. But I would pose that the response needs to be organizing, that the resilience of communities is what preserves the mental wholeness and physical wholeness of people, families, and communities. And if you don't have the resources to organize, then you can't actually deal with this problem at the root. Now, I'm talking about our communities that have been traumatized and targeted by violence, but also I'm talking about white people need to go organize and go get their people, because their people are out of control right now. One thing I like to say is give more resource. We need organizing infrastructures. And without the ability to organize people in their neighborhoods, in their schools, on their blocks to deal with the real issues of the fallout from white supremacy and institutional racism, it's very hard for people to heal and reclaim their mental health. So I'll just finish by saying, I like to say that community is the center. And in this moment, we are challenged to hold the center in the face of much violence coming at us incessantly. And actually, it's not new. It's always been happening. People are saying, oh, there's an escalation of anti-Asian violence. No, that's not true. It's always been here. And it's always been here against Black people. And it's always been here against Indigenous people and Latinx people and Indigenous people. And it spreads out from there. So the challenge in this moment is, how do we hold the center?
And
As I heard
Please,
Mike,
go ahead. Nala, then Judith. Go ahead, Nala.
I heard Mike talking, especially around white folks, getting together to get their folks. This thing around trust came up for me, and I'm often trying to, when we think about grace under pressure, is like being able to name, like, oftentimes the image of white folks come together is a trauma. It's so triggering, right? That lack of trust and that relationship that we have visually as BIPOC, right? Black, Indigenous, people of color have seen, is that I can't trust when white folks get together to do what they said they're going to do, especially getting their folks. What I do require and what I would like is for white folks to be able to give up that thing that they have close to power, right? And really to look at the infrastructures that they hold and how can they redistribute it in an equitable way, like really like letting go, right? Buildings, right? When we think about infrastructures, if COVID has taught us nothing about brick and mortar, is that brick and mortar has nothing that is more valuable than bodies and soul. We have lost so many people during COVID. And so when we're thinking about this, the body holds account, I think about how so many Black, Indigenous, people of color are currently homeless. And when we think about this conversation of land, I want white folks to give up the thing that they're holding so dear to people that need it.
Amen.
Nala,
Amen.
Before we move on and before we pick up Judith's comment, Judith, if you can hold that for just a moment. Nala, can you talk for a second about the work that you're doing with your organization in acquiring land?
Yeah, thank you for holding space for that. So my organization is called Reuniting of African Descendants, and we focus urgently on same-gender loving and trans folk. And so when COVID took place, no one was looking at the intersection of trans and queer folks, and also what that looks like across the African diaspora and how they are also impacted already from the epidemic and the like, for example, HIV, right? And access to medication. So we were able to get access to folks in Uganda who were already struggling with HIV and living with HIV in ways of having to survive through sex work and so on and so on. And so we were able to get half an acre of land and start an agriculture project. And so what that agriculture project looks like is being able to grow resources that they can feed themselves. Because again, food insecurity is so real, especially if there's let's say policies and laws that prevent folks to exist. So we often talk about folks being able to get, like, pull yourself up by the bootstrap type of mind, while we also see folks oppressing and pulling resources from people. And so I look at things like food. How can one think and function if they don't have food? How can one fight a virus or an immune system, or strengthen their immune system, if they don't have access? So Road has been a passion baby of mine to bridge those gaps between trans, queer folks, moms, folks who are literally surviving. And so we saw the success in this year when we were able to go to Kenya and have an East African committee, and it was around 30 folks during a pandemic, which I don't know how we did it, but we did with little resources.
Judith, I'm reminded that to remind those of you watching, we would love to hear your questions too. Clearly, I could engage with this panel for quite some time without interruption, but we would love to hear your questions and we will ask them. So drop them into the chat where you are. Judith, and then Maru, I have a question for you. But Judith, please, what were you going to say in response to Mike?
Mike is so right. At the center of all that we are experiencing is the need to get organized, to be organized, to have a circle from which we can derive strength and an understanding of the root causes. You know, organizing in this country, a lot of people have characterized organizing. I know President Obama was attacked for having been a part of some organizing projects in South Chicago that were related to Saul Alinsky. Well, frankly, Saul Alinsky, a couple of white guys on the south side of Chicago, did not discover, like Plymouth Rock, organizing. Our communities have been organizing since dirt, since the beginning of time. There's no other way that you can explain why all of us continue to exist, including the labor movement, organizing. We've been organizing and figuring out, and when there's been big shifts in policies and governance, it's because of organizing, starting at the grassroots and having leaders who understand that you need a values-led strategy. I mean, as much as you want to say about the far right, the truth is that they stay on message, their values. And the kind of organizing that we need is to end, is got to be rooted in the idea that you can't think in a linear way. It's not cause and effect. Any of the crisis problems that we're talking about, it's not a cause and effect. We have to comprehend the relationship between the problems that we are facing, the issues that we can tackle, and point towards that horizon of addressing the root causes, which has to do with systems that are maintained by individuals and people are rich and powerful. But nevertheless, if we're starting from the point of organizing based on our values, not a linear sense of the problems of cause and effect, and understand things within relationship, we'll have holistic solutions that will attract people to take action and use their power in movement.
Judith, I want to ask you about a specific action that your group is undertaking, but let me come back around to that. I want to shift gears, and I had a question for Maru, but before I do that, Felissa, you wanted to respond to the question about narrative violence. Could you tell us what you were thinking?
Yes. When I think about narrative violence, I think about, particularly as we've seen this week, the weaponization of disability, particularly mental health. We see that when white boys and men commit acts of violence, you always see their mental health being used as an excuse, as a reason. Whereas when it's someone of color, no one cares about their mental health status or their disability status, and violence is enacted upon them and is actually weaponized against them in a very harmful way. So, and think about the weaponization of disability is really digs into whose disability matters, whose disability is understood, and whose disability is used in a way that strips them further of their humanity. And when I see, in my mind, like clockwork, when white supremacists, actions get excused by the fact that they may have a mental health condition, I think about the way that disability has been played upon in this country through our disabled enslaved ancestors whose disability were utilized against them. Under the institution of slavery, we know that it was a chattel system producing labor, have some sort of ability to really be productive for someone else's gain. And for disabled folks of that time, you fit into one of two categories broadly. One being that you could not produce labor, which means that you were financially useless and a waste for a slave owner. Or if your disability is exceptional, the slave owner may find a way to make money off you by sending you off to exhibits. There's countless stories of enslaved disabled people who, were sold off and mothers had to fight to get their children back. And I think of these stories and the transition over the years of this country as to how we think about disability, from something that is to be exploited, from enslaved times to being hidden away during the ugly laws, to present day of how when there are acts of violence, particularly state-sanctioned violence, disability is erased from that person's narrative. Many of the people, particularly Black folks, whose names that we came to know Kareem Gaines, Sandra Bland, Freddie Gray, they were all disabled, but their disability identity was erased from their narrative. And it's really so tragic when that happens because over 50% of those killed by police are disabled, meaning that of that number, the majority are Black and brown disabled folks who are really dying at the hands of our police, dying in our communities and our streets. So I think that when it comes to narrative violence, thinking of who's validated and having a disability acknowledged and how that is done is very key to really seeing the whole picture of what's going on.
Got you. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you for that. Shifting gears a little bit. And again, a reminder, please share your questions in the chat and we will get to them. Maru, I was talking with a friend, Danny Simmons, earlier about this panel. And he said something to me that really struck me. He said, well, you know, the thing about activists is that we don't always have the luxury of having something wrong with us. You know, and as was brought up earlier about, how we all look to leaders to, guide us. And even when we draw upon the leadership within ourselves. But at the same time, we're human beings and human beings break down. So in the activist circles in which you move, Maru, what are you seeing as the issues that are affecting people most, and how do activists find the permission, if that's the right way to put it, or the opportunity to step back and recharge, rest, whatever needs to happen?
Well, we have too much of that. I believe that oppression doesn't take time off. You know, the oppression is like, okay, oops, 5, see you tomorrow. It doesn't. It happens all the time. It happens every day. And I think that us as organizers, we need to understand that we're not here to solve every single issue. We cannot respond to every single emergency. We need to be selective on what we can do. We treat the impossible and we make people believe the impossible. I've said, if we work in the possibilities, nobody would know me. You know, I would probably be very happy, you know, in a different world. But I chose this world. I chose the world of impossibilities being possible. I like to believe that it's not a dream. And I think we have been able to prove that it's not a dream, because the issues in the communities I work with are, it's basically fear. We are afraid all the time. We are afraid that our families are going to be divided. We're afraid that we're going to be taken back to countries where we cannot live. We're afraid that we might be killed in those countries. We're afraid that we might die in detention and nobody knows about us, that we've been kidnapped by Immigration Customs Enforcement or by police and nobody knows where we're at. We're afraid that nobody understands our language. We're afraid of so many things that we cannot be afraid of very basic things such as I don't have health care. I feel depressed. I'm not going to go to the doctor. I feel some ache. I'm not going to go. That's okay. At least I have a job. And so because the fear is so immense and it comes from so many different places, that the prioritization of issues for our community is impossible. It's just basic fear. So for us as organizers to respond to that, it's extremely difficult. And it's obviously, we get tired. We definitely get tired. And, you know, yeah, people want to believe that we're perfect. And in my line of work, we get also the blame for everything. If something didn't go right, then it's our fault. You know, usually we joke in Resistencia, if something happened, oh, it's Maru did it, right? So we learn that we as immigrants, we're expected to assimilate and be perfect in order to be accepted in the country. And we cannot do that to ourselves. We cannot demand of our own movement and our own communities and our own organizers to be perfect, to be assimilated by the system, and to do anything that is asked of us just to be accepted. We are who we are, and we should be accepted the way we are. And that includes having depression or having difficult times where we need to take time off. And our community should be taking care of that we can actually take that time off, being taken care by our communities, so we can come back with much more strength to continue the fight.
I
Thank you,
want
Maru.
to jump in to what Maru was saying, just to add as well, because as I was hearing Maru just like woke something inside of me in regards to perfectionism. And my team and I, we often ground around the idea of we're not perfect, but we're present, and knowing that there isn't a quick fix, and that oppression is not for us to fix it, but to address it, right? And how we fix it with ourselves is in the power of, and when I say we don't fix it, right, what I mean is that we can address it and we can fight, but it's not our job to put the Band-Aid over it. We're not going to put our Band-Aid over it. And so what I think about is each breath we take is a form of liberation. When I'm with my team and we take a moment and we breathe and we check in with each other and say, hey, did you get to eat today? Did you eat? You take 15 minutes for yourself? And then understanding that we are God's manifestation of liberation. We are our ancestors' manifestation of liberation. And although all of that is great, I still also get to realize in being present that, wait, there's a trans person outside on the street right now. That even our cis brothers and sisters that are Black and Indigenous has cast them out. And so the multi-layers of that keeps me, okay, I can breathe today and I can rest today, and does another person have that privilege? And so the balance is if I take a moment to breathe, to recharge myself, is not to just use that time just to sit, but also say, okay, after my breath, how am I giving the opportunity for another person to have breath? So really take a deep breath in and exhale with just knowing that something better is coming.
Got you. Thank you, Nala. Mike, you wanted to respond also?
Yeah, I love this question, Brian. I am also a Chinese medicine doctor, and I'm a Taoist lineage holder. So I think about this a lot, actually, because I think this is really the question about trauma. And, every organizer carries historical trauma themselves. In my own family, my parents and my entire older generation of my family were incarcerated in Japanese American concentration camps during World War II. And my East Coast family, I live in New York, my East Coast family in upstate New York were massacred by a gunman during the war who came into their house and shot them all on Christmas Eve. So we all come to these spaces out of some internal feeling of necessity that the only option is action. And it's interesting because someone once said to me, in the midst of your family trauma, you had different options and you chose to be a helper. And I think I did because I think I faced internal annihilation if I didn't. And this was the way for me to save myself. And so I think there's incredible strategies for healing and regeneration in our cultures. Sometimes they've been erased or obscured or overlaid by that white supremacy narrative, but there's incredibly powerful healing traditions. There's a Japanese word, it's shugyo. And I was recently talking to Kazahaga, who is a nonviolence trainer and longtime abolitionist prison activist. And he was talking about, in the Buddhist tradition, we have a practice, much in the way you might think about martial arts as a practice, but it's a practice to develop internal strength so that your center does hold, so that in the face of great violence, you remain supple, that you bend and you don't snap, you're not brittle, and that you find your resilience and your inner light in that space. And that's actually the light of healing, that when we are in good shape as organizers, we actually help spread that light. and regenerate the light in everywhere we go. But what's really important, and I think what we often forget, is that we also need healing. That, famous quotation in Chinese medicine is "Healer, heal thyself." And so last summer, I had, I guess, what people might call a nervous breakdown. I started having panic attacks and anxiety so extreme that they wouldn't stop. And I lost 30 pounds. I couldn't sleep and I couldn't function. And I actually started to feel like, at times, like I'd lost the inner light and I didn't know if I could go on because I felt like I was being annihilated. And in that moment, I had to marshal everything I understood about healing as a Chinese medicine doctor, as a Taoist lineage priest, as a practitioner of pure counseling, and following the teachings of Mario Rodriguez Cabos, pen name Silo, from the New Humanism movement of South America. All of these have informed me, and I'm surrounded. I have a very strong community of healers and leaders that supported me through that. But that's not unusual. That's not exceptional. This is the work of what it means to stand at the front line and face your trauma and transform it in the face of extreme and escalating violence, and then to try to hold your center and your humanity. I am reminded of the writing of Ta-Nehisi Coates, who said that if we're going to have a reparations movement in this country, we need a spiritual renewal. And I think that's right in line with where we need to go as in terms of healing ourselves.
And
Thank you, Mike. Judith, yeah, go right ahead.
Mike, my prayers for your path. I think all of us have been in that kind of place.
Yeah, we all have been there, right?
Exactly. And when I say organizing is our medicine, it is because balance, achieving balance, healing is a constant process. It's a constant struggle. I'm always reminded when I say healing and balance is a constant struggle. I remember when I was very, very young, the Angela Davis Defense Committee kind of put forth the slogan that freedom is a constant struggle. And I think what I learned from that struggle and what I've learned from all the movements I've been in is that balance. From an indigenous framework, we are always seeking that balance, but it's a constant struggle. And the only way you know for sure if you're in balance is the community, Mike, that you're in, reflecting back to you how you are walking. And that you can only know yourself within community. So many of our young people in Indian country, we have one of the highest rates of teenage suicide. Why? Because community relationships have broken down and people feel isolated. And that balance that you seek for oneself is the same balance in a broader circle that we seek in our communities. And so I would say in some ways that organizing not only is our medicine, but the idea of it's almost a political concept of self-determination. Like for us, when we talk about sovereignty and self-determination, because we are nations within this nation, we are dual citizens. When we are native, the truth is that without being in relationship to the larger nation that surrounds our nations, we're not going to be in balance. We are not going to be able to change the systems of oppression. So I think that idea of finding balance, being a constant struggle, it gives us hope. So if I mess up, if I get off the path, I know there's a path back and that there's people in the circle that are going to help guide me back there. And that's what organizing is about, creating community.
I love that, Judith, because it reminds me of this saying we have that when the village mess up, when one person mess up within the village, rather than pushing them out and isolating them, you create a circle and you remind them of who they are, what their intentions was, and fill them back up with that path to get there. And I think that's what I think about that revival, that spiritual revival that is so necessary, is that oftentimes we forget the restorative justice piece is a part of the healing, is that we will make mistakes in life, absolutely. But to have that tribe of folks that remind you of who you are and your intentions and how worthy you are, it's so necessary in this work of activism, and especially for mental health, is to have that tribe that mirrors you, calls you in versus out. The calling is so necessary. And I think oftentimes having access to that place of call in is not something that we get to practice, but it's a reminder that we have access to.
Right. We have a couple of audience questions, and one of them is a great segue, Nala, from what you were just saying about the community that calls you in rather than calls you out. Here's an audience question: How do the panelists respond to pushback from members of the communities they represent and are fighting for? Maru, I think that you had indicated you wanted to respond to that.
Yeah, I could stay here forever and listen to you all. There's so much that I can relate to, but also so much I'm learning. So thank you so much for having me in the space. I think that for us as organizers, we always have to remind ourselves that we come from colonized countries, right? Our countries were invaded by Europeans. We were told that there's something wrong with us. Like Eduardo Galeano said, when they came, they had the Bible under their hand, and we had the land. When they told us, close your eyes, and when we closed them and opened our eyes, they had the land and we had the Bible under our hands. So because of that, when we come to the United States as immigrants, we still carry that. And so we cannot ask from our communities what is not there yet. So we need to meet people where they're at. And if our communities push back, we need to listen to why. But we also have to explore together why we believe that organizing shouldn't happen, why people are afraid to come to actions, why people believe that don't complain about minimum wage. At least you're getting some money. You have a job. So we need to understand those and help build a space so people can learn those issues, learn the root causes, which were talked about before by Judith. And we also need to acknowledge that it's okay to mess up. We all are gonna mess up. We already have, but we need to have that space. And I was speaking about that if we mess up, we should be able to bring together to fix it. How do we fix this? I believe that when you messed up and how you react to that, it speaks about who you are. So we believe that we in our movement, we don't judge individuals, we judge the system, because we have been judged again and again and again, and we're seen as disposable. So we don't want to do that to our communities that are pushing back, or to those that have messed up.
Yeah, thank
I
you.
remember,
Judith, go right ahead.
I remember a time when pushback in the community, I'm an elder, I came up in the 70s. I remember I spent a lot of time being one of those kind of organizers, like, you don't agree with me? You're dead. You're done. Get out of here. Polarization, pushing back in the 70s, a lot of organizers, we did that. It was we were feeling militant. But now I understand that polarizing our community is further dividing us. That if you push back so hard on those who don't agree with you, you burn bridges. You eliminate the possibility of yourself playing a role in creating a path for those people to come to a new understanding of their relationship to the problems and issues in our community. Because we're trying as organizers to help people see what are they adding to the gumbo? What can they do to come up with a solution? So we can never go back to that old school 70s thing of polarizing the community. We have to lead with love. We have to lead with our values to give people the possibility of regaining their balance and understanding their relationship to all things that exist.
Thank you. Valissa, I want to ask you, in following up on Judith's comments and what Nala was also saying about the purpose of activism. And Mike talked about activism, the aspects of it that have to deal with the spiritual self-preservation. And Judith has talked about organizing as medicine. When we see, when you encounter folks who feel, who say to you that frankly, they're just feeling hopeless, and, experiencing despair in the face of, tremendous adversity. And what is it that activism can actually accomplish? And what's the point of even becoming active, as it were, in protesting and so forth, if from their perspective, it's not creating a change? How do you respond? What do you see as the purpose of activism?
I think for me, particularly coming from a community, the disabled community, to where activism is sometimes our first space where we can meet each other, meet other disabled folks of different backgrounds that understand our plight uniquely. Just this week, I celebrated the 6th anniversary of my hashtag Disability2White that conceptualized the racism, anti-Blackness, erasure, and exclusion of disabled people of color within the movement. When I came into this space, I realized how very white, very male it is, and how there was great resistance, still is, of the new guard of activists like myself who say that this is our place too. This is our community as well, and we're going to claim it as we always had a right to. And I think that's so important for people to find community. That's why I see activism as find a community, particularly for those who have felt so invisible for so long. As a Black disabled woman, many of us say that, we don't feel like we belong anywhere. In the disabled community, nobody wants to talk about race. In the Black community, nobody wants to talk about ableism or identify as disabled. And it's so important when people find each other to have a safe space where we can talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly, and what it means to be in these disabled bodies, particularly Black disabled bodies, and how the world interacts with us and what are the realities. I tell people all the time, if you care about any type of issue, you got to dig deeper for the disability angle and dig deeper under that for the intersectional understanding. And I think that when it comes to people understanding activism, it's knowing that you have so much to learn. I've been doing this work totally for 9 years, been particularly in the activism space for 6, and I'm constantly learning new things every day. And that learning holds me accountable so I can watch out for the privileges that I have to ensure that I'm not unknowingly oppressing or harming someone. And it also allows me to see that there are so many people that I have yet to meet, to learn from, to really build with. My background is in social work. So automatically, I'm always thinking about how do we work together to address an issue so that those who may be at the bottom, those who may be invisible or feel invisible, are no longer there. Who needs to make room? Who needs to get out the way? And who needs to be fully seen and lead? I cannot wait. Judith was talking about becoming being an elder. I cannot wait to become an elder and just let the young people work, and I just be there to support them, in whatever way that they need to. And I think that's what activism is: taking the mantle when it's your time, and then passing the baton when the next generation is supposed to, make headway into what you've started. And also, I want to give a quick notice that today is a disabled ancestor's birthday. Stacy Milburn. She is the Google Doodle for the day. And I suggest everybody go check her out to learn her story. She was one of the creators of the framework Disability Justice. And she was a queer disabled woman of color. And it's people like Stacy who paved the way for us to really have these hard conversations in activism to help shift the narrative of activism so that it was more inclusive and intentional for all of us. And so I just wanted to make space to say her name today because those are the people who have influenced me. Those are the people I am responsible for. And those coming up after me are those that I will have to be accountable for no matter what my work looks like in the future.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Melissa. Maru, just to say, Maru, I know you have to hop off in a moment. So let me just ask you this question, which will lead into that perhaps. When you talked about the fear that people experience, and this, a constant source, a constant array of threats that are aimed at folks. How do, and the group has talked about, the need to find and build and nurture community. So when it comes time to do that type of recharge that's so necessary, you have a community around you within to do that. I want to ask you about the inverse almost, which is how do you let people know that you're there for them?
Well, we try everything. We're in touch with people in detention through our phones. We have 3 phone lines for them to answer, to call us, and we answer. We try to answer all day, every day. We're all volunteers, but we find the time. We pay for services to call them, to do video calls, to email. Everything is expensive. We have to pay for absolutely everything. But we do something that we call Solidarity Days, where we show outside the detention center, and we're as loud as possible as we can in the hopes that maybe some of them will hear us. Sometimes it matches with the yard time, so we don't see them, but they can hear us. And sometimes we do a call and response. We send letters. Now, just finally, just this week, visitation has restarted again in detention centers. It's been over 2 years that people have not received a social visit. And we go on television, we go on radio, hoping that they will listen. So we try everything we can. And one of the things that we have been doing lately that has been very successful is that we do video calls with people in detention while we're outside in the Solidarity Day. So we show through the laptop, through the camera, all the people that are outside. And you should see the faces of the people detained that are, especially those that are in solitary confinement, like right now that there's a hunger strike. And they have been sent to solitary confinement as retaliation for taking action, for fighting fear with action. And it's just amazing. We had one of the guys that he was speechless. He didn't know what to say because he didn't expect so many people showing up outside the detention center. And we chant, you're not alone, no están solos, you're not alone, no están solos. And every time we talk to them, we always let them know that they're not alone. We cannot just imagine, it's just hard to imagine what if it's one of us being inside. And the uncertainty of being separated from your family and then placed in solitary confinement where nobody knows you're there, where you can talk to anyone. So it is extremely important for us to be in touch with them. And that's why I have to leave now, because actually I'm waiting for a call for a person in detention that is still on hunger strike. And we hope they end the strike. They have gotten a lot of great things. They got a little bit more food. They got a clean unit. They actually came and cleaned the unit. You shouldn't go on hunger strike to get clean clothes. You shouldn't go on hunger strike to get a visit, but that happens. And so our job is to end this nightmare, to shut down the detention center. And we just want our people with us. We want them free. We want them happy. And I want to join the elderly road trip and have others come. And so again, I apologize for not
Not
being
at all. Not at all. Maru, thank you so much for the work you're doing. Thank you for you being you. And thank you for being here with us right now. We understand that you had to make a move. Blessings.
Thank you.
And respect.
Thank you again. Gracias.
Indeed. Mike, there was a question that came in, and it seemed like it was almost tailor-made for you. I want to pull this question up. The country is so... Okay, there are 2 questions here about spirituality. I'll pose them both to you, and you tell me which one you want, and maybe you can even blend them together. How do you understand the interaction between spiritual and emotional resistance to narrative violence? Is one question. Second question is, the country is so divided, how would we even begin to have that very needed and necessary spiritual movement? Two different questions, but both addressing spirituality. And after Mike responds, Nala, if you had a response, because I'd also wanted to ask you about your relationship to spirituality. We'll welcome any thoughts you have there. But Mike, please go ahead. Oh, you're on mute, Mike.
Thank you, Brian. I'll put on my Chinese medicine hat for just a moment. We talk about the emotions and the spirits are contained in the body, actually in the organs. And but we do differentiate between the spirits and the emotions. And I think when somebody has suffered trauma, they need to have the ability to safely reclaim their ability to show their emotion and to have their emotions. Sometimes people who've experienced great trauma and anxiety actually have to numb and go and sort of withdraw from themselves. And in that process, if they're not allowed to show their emotions, let's say to cry or to tremble or to rage, then what happens is that there's actually there's a deep impact on what I refer to as the sacred or the profound of the human being that I think is in every single person, even in that most unfortunate situation when someone is shooting other people or charging the Capitol. Those people have profound spirits as well, and they've lost connection to them. And so the question, around how do we have a spiritual renewal, I think is an interesting one. But here's the best I can figure out, because I think about this every day, actually. I think that when people don't have an internal practice, they become very focused on the external. So the person who says something mean to you affects you. The cold weather affects you. The lack of food affects you. All of this is external, and it, of course, has an impact on the internal. But mostly in our country, we're trained to face everything external and react to it. And if you are then susceptible to being triggered by external things, and you've lost your central connection to your internal strength, that means that other external forces can have an impact on you, and you may not even have control over that. So I like to think that by developing an internal practice, you actually start to have a relationship with the sacred or the profound that is who you are. That's also your moral compass, I believe. Mm-hmm. And when people despair, and I've been in this place myself, and I had to fight my way out of it step by step, moment by moment, when I felt like I was being annihilated. When people despair, they can't see a future. They can't see what's possible ahead of them. And so I think part of the job of the organizer is to help people develop a relationship to themselves internally, so that they can actually start to have a conversation about how to write their own narrative. We're talking about narrative tonight. And so when MLK gave, a speech wrote a letter from Birmingham jail, that letter resonated with people and helped them see a different narrative path forward than the one that was being offered by white supremacy. And in that moment, faith has a chance to rekindle itself. And faith is a really interesting thing. I don't mean faith as in I believe in a certain religion or sectarian belief. I'm talking about faith in yourself to go forward. And when we lose faith, we despair. If we can open our future, we can actually rekindle hope. And I'll give you a really quick example, and then I'll pass it off. When the Trump administration started putting unaccompanied children in prisons and separating children from their families and imprisoning them, Japanese Americans who had been incarcerated as children themselves during World War II, our elders. And I saw Judith write to us privately, talk about the elders. She knows about the elders. Our elders stepped forward and they said, we cannot allow this to happen again. And so we supported them, and we went to Fort Sill in Oklahoma, and we stopped them from imprisoning 1,400 children there. And we stood in solidarity with the indigenous community who had also been imprisoned in that Army base, and their children had been stolen from their families and in those horrible boarding schools. So there's the intersectional narrative of white supremacy impacting our communities. But when we went there and we stood all together, Oklahoma Black Lives Matters, Dr. Sharia Moore was there, arm in arm with us. AIM Indian Territory, Oklahoma Territory was there. The United We Dream was there. When we stood together, what we didn't realize was that in trying to stop them from doing it to someone else, we actually healed our own trauma. That was unforeseen. That was completely unforeseen. And we started holding healing circles after our direct actions, because we said, don't just shout and part. We got to talk to each other and hold space with each other across communities. So then we started, after these direct actions, just holding healing circles together. And incredible healing came out of that. And in the solidarity, and that's why we became Sudu for Solidarity, we found that it opened a path forward, and it restored the possibility of hope where people were despairing in the face of 500 years of terrible historical violence towards our communities.
And elders from my tribe were there.
That's fascinating. It's especially fascinating to hear in this conversation about activism and mental health, how much of the conversation is grounded around spirituality among the threads that we're talking about tonight. I want to close out with a question for Vilissa and Judith, but Nala, I would love to hear your response in this question and this talk about spirituality.
Yeah, the first thing that came to me as we were talking, Mike and just Judith and just the whole panel, was I was thinking about Assata Shakur quote about being a warrior and being a struggler has been forced on me by oppression. And I think about how just that quote, how I sit with that, and like, how does one, in knowing that oppression is upon, and if we look at all of the interfaith practices, there's always that one who has been exiled because of oppression, or those many who have been exiled of oppression, and how they find healing with themselves, as Mike was just echoing. Mike is looking at self, but also when we look at indigenous practice, Afro-Indigenous, indigenous to this land and the many lands attached to it, is our relationship with land and nature. Our relationship with herbs, our relationship with soil, our relationship with the animals, our relationship with sky, our relationship with sun, and looking at those things. And so I ground with that, and I ground with the concept of humanity and that humanist experience in spirituality. It's that I want to get to a place when we're able to look at third gender. I want to get to a place when we're able to look at the two spirit and the person, and not the contents of what their flesh is wearing, but the spirit of who they are. So when that individual walks in the office, it's not what they have on, it's not what they're wearing, it's not the color of their skin, it's not all these other materialistic things, but it's the soul and the spirit of that person that we're assessing, that we're inviting in, that we're giving space to. That's what I want to get to. It's to that, because I believe that there is a genocide on third gender folks. There is a genocide on two-spirited individuals, and I want to interrupt that in such a huge way across races and classes and so on, and all the other isms.
Thank you, Nala. I'm getting a message that we have 2 minutes before we close. I think I'm going to pose my last question to Vilissa and Judith, ask you for any closing remarks. But I'm going to do this. We're going to do this like really swiftly. So Vilissa, I've wanted to ask you this all night. What is the place for vulnerability and joy in the face of encountering adversity and responding to it? Can you give us a short response?
I think that it's so important for us to guard our joy, even in the terrible times, even when it's hard. That's something I've been practicing more and more during this pandemic. What brings me joy? It could be something big or small. That sustains you when it gets hard. It sustains you when you are vulnerable. When the pain hits so bad that you don't think you can get up, that you can breathe. Joy is not, you know, joy is our birthright. It's not something that has to be absent because there's so much pain. And I think that's how I look at it. You know, hold on to that joy while you embrace the vulnerability and knowing that everybody has something to bring and that joy can be shared with so many other people to keep them afloat.
Wonderful. Thank you. Judith, as our elder tonight, closing remarks, anything you would like this audience to go away and think about in 15, 20 seconds?
I think the gumbo has been stirred by Mike and Nala and Jalissa. I will end by quoting an old friend of mine, Cornel West, justice is what love looks like in public. And that's what organizing is about. And that's why organizing is our medicine.
Ooh, that's fire. I couldn't have written it. Thank you. Thank you, Judith. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Nala. Thank you, Maru. Thank you, Angel, for that wonderful poem at the top, poems at the top that helped create the environment that we needed. I want to say thank you also to our promotional partners, the Asian American Federation and the National Alliance of Mental Illness of New York City, for their support here and the great work that they do year round. On behalf of everyone with the WNET Group, a big thank you to all of you for joining us tonight. We hope you will return next Thursday for our final town hall in this series, Break the News, a conversation with journalists about mental health. Learn more at 13.org, Grace Under Pressure. And you can also watch last week's programs and the previous weeks at that same link. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and we will see you again soon. Good night.